Oh my God, the tunnel, because there's a sword of Troy. I always love the sword of Troy.
Oh, I forgot about the sword of Troy. I wish Odysseus were just smarter in this film. Why does the cowherder have beef?
Like, see, exactly.
What is the thing that you least liked?
The ending bothered me so much when I was in the cinema. I felt like a lot of the film was like Christopher Nolan, big font, Odyssey, mini font.
You're holding out on us.
I just can't stop talking is the problem.
What was your favorite part of the film?
Oh, hands down the...
Hi, Erica. Welcome. How you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, how you doing today?
I'm great. I'm really excited for this. I love your channel. I watched your review of the Christopher Nolan film, so I'm sure we have loads to discuss. But yeah, I'm just really thrilled to be here.
Thrilled that you're here with us today. So everybody, this is Erica Stevenson, and she runs MoAn Inc., the YouTube channel, website, and just this month, published author of The Odyssey Effect, which I highly recommend. In fact, I want to plug this right now. The audiobook as well, which is fantastic, because of course you recite it. And I think anybody who has not yet seen The Odyssey, the movie, or has already, maybe you want to get into it, or if you've seen it or not, read this book because it is one of the best, most accessible introductions to not just the Odyssey itself, but the long interpretive history from antiquity through the Middle Ages, Renaissance, and up to the present day. So strongly recommend The Odyssey Effect. So why do you love The Odyssey so much, Erica?
It's fun. I think I just love Homeric poetry so much, like both the Odyssey and the Iliad. I think it's very hard to talk about one without talking about the other. And I just think that, you know, these texts encompass so many things, not just in theme, but just emotions. And you kind of get to read a story that is so human and yet is almost set in like, I always say this on my channel, like it's kind of like a fantasy world because it is sort of mythology and legend, but it is based in reality, of course, because it is the ancient Greek world is real, everybody who's listening. But you have, you know, gods and monsters and all of those wonderful things. And I think it's a really, both texts are just, they're just really good stories, and they encompass so much of the human experience that you get permission to experience those things that maybe you don't in your regular life, but through these characters.
Yeah, boy, I agree fully. And every time I've been exposed to Odyssey since like middle school, whenever I got that, I remember pictures of some cute illustration of one of these readers for middle or ninth graders. I don't remember when, like the Cyclops and the ship on the shore. I still remember that page and looking at it and just like, oh, wow, this is neat. But it was much later, very much more recently, that I've even been able to read the original. But of course, I haven't to actually have read every single line of the original. I haven't even done that yet. But I've read a couple translations, listened to Ian McKellen recitation of the Figgle's translation, which I love, which is great because he recorded it right when he was playing Gandalf. So just like this, wait, I have part of book 8 here. So now when the good son of Alcinous heard that he came and took his stand in the midst and spoke to Odysseus, "Come, sir, stranger, do thou too." That's the Murray translation, not the Figgle's translation.
You know what though? I got to give that a listen. That sounds really good.
It's so great because I mean Ian McKellen is
well,
I mean he excels in everything, but I think this might be one of the best things he's ever done. Maybe that's just because I love the Odyssey.
Yeah, slightly biased, but
yeah, exactly. So we saw the film, and I strongly recommend your 2.5-hour, excellent, thorough, classicists and also film lovers review that's on your channel, MoAn Inc.
It's very long. It's like I had to edit it down as well to that because I was like, you can't put out a review of a film that's just as long as the film. So I was like, I've got to cut out the last 30 minutes are cut out. Actually, technically 45 minutes are cut out of it.
You're holding out on us.
I just can't stop talking is the problem.
I understand that. Let's go right to maybe the quick, what was your favorite part of the film?
Oh, hands down the siren scene. That was, I thought, perfectly done, brilliant. I think the sirens are one that I think the reason why I loved it so much is because people assume that they know the sirens. Like everybody thinks they're like the saucy mermaids or whatever it is. And obviously coming from the ancient world, we know that they're birds. There seems to be a bit of contention when classicists watch things that are set in ancient Greece and then there are the saucy mermaids in there instead of the birds. And I think Christopher Nolan kind of picked option 3, which is just to ignore either of those things and to go completely audio with that scene. And I thought it was beautifully done. Like it was the only part of the film where I was sat and I wasn't taking notes. I was like, oh, I'm here. Like this is good.
Yeah. Yeah. The and the misery, and what was it, the quote that this was an addition that Nolan made that I found intriguing, that the reason that their call is so compelling is they tell you everything, basically all of the mistakes you made, and how, if basically something defective, if you were to come here, then you would actually resolve all your
Mm,
regrets, your
hmm.
guilts, which I think is very much in theme with his interpretation of the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like Nolan does so many different things that are parts of his interpretation. And I was always looking for like those glimmers of like, okay, this is Homer coming through and not Nolan coming through. And I really felt like a lot of that scene was him going back to Homer and then like the little teeny tiny bits of him in there. Whereas I felt like a
Mm.
lot of the film, I don't know how you felt about it. I felt like a lot of the film was like Christopher Nolan, big font, Odyssey, mini font. Whereas that scene felt like Odyssey, big font, and Christopher Nolan, little font. And I was like, yay,
Yeah.
fabulous.
I think that's very persuasive. And yeah, I felt the same way too. I mean, just being, because I had just re-listened to the whole thing in about a week right before seeing it, so it was super fresh in my mind.
Hmm.
And so I felt, I don't know, I felt like, I feel like I get something about the Odyssey. But this is also especially in the conclusion of the Odyssey effect, which we'll talk about later, about like individuals' interpretations and their respective validity. But I felt like I now really know the Odyssey in a better way. I feel like, oh wow, this theme, like what this story is so powerful. And then on the screen, I saw a very good film which had the trappings, events, scenes, but otherwise was filled with, I think, important and useful themes, both in cinema and both for the sake of not just popular culture, but for culture. Nevertheless, it just wasn't, it wasn't the Odyssey that I thought I had known. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
What were you? I'm curious. I've been asking everybody this. Like, literally, I went to the cinema by myself the other night. What day is it today? Friday. So I went like literally 2 nights ago to the cinema, and I was just asking everyone like, "What did you think?" But sorry, I'm just like this random person in the back row. So I'm curious from your perspective, like, what were you going in hoping for? Like, were you hoping to see particular scenes or particular characters? Like,
Ooh, that's a really good question. Because I'm actually quite a Nolan fan. I think
mm,
Interstellar and Inception, the Batman trilogy are some of my favorite all-time movies of certainly the 21st century. But at the same time, I was kind of like, like the people were complaining about the dialogue. Frankly, didn't bother me very much. I thought it would more. I don't know. I know you have some. You've been here in the U.S. Before, but generally, I think that we still have in our psyche as Americans a feeling that received pronunciation accent has a sort of authority in certain contexts. So
mhm.
that's not unique to people living in the UK, I think, but we tend to feel that way too. Yet it didn't bother me, and I didn't find the familiarity of certain terms that didn't bother me. So there was a thing about that, and I was like, okay, let's see what this was. I was actually surprised how much little things bothered me. Well, maybe little things, but I mean, um, the Troy, oh, hold on. This is my problem. I talk and then I get off track. What was your question, Erica?
No, good, good. Yeah. So tell me more. What were the little things?
Argos. Argos.
Oh.
Yeah, that bothered me. I thought that was because actually I think I remember in your review, you talked about how it was the Nolan stoicism that I think works still with the emotional resonance of the recognition between Telemachus and Odysseus that one was the other.
Mhm.
Now, part of me, because as I'm watching it, I only have seen it once so far. That was over a week ago. But, as I try to remember it, I remember thinking, "This is where's Eumaeus? Eumaeus is Eumaeus is blind. They blinded him so he wouldn't recognize Odysseus. So Eumaeus won't be able to fight the suitors." And I already realized that from the very beginning. Like, oh, that's why he's blind.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like, oh, and then I immediately was kind of ready to be annoyed by that the ending wouldn't be the epic ending I was hoping for. Anyway, so it's different characters, Telemachus, just so stuff was out of order for me. That's how
Hmm.
much I felt like in the moment nitpicking it in my mind. And then so there is that, but I can cinematically, especially after hearing your review, I can very much respect and I think I would like it if I saw it again that scene. But the Argos part that's right before it, I don't know. I've had a lot of pets, and I'm a dog lover. So the
Hmm.
idea of this in his 20th year, as it says in the line, this is 20th year, he's able to acknowledge Odysseus, but not vice versa, and he says that to you privately. and he tries to keep it. Like, he can't acknowledge it. But in the movie, he goes over and he pets him. Now you tell me, because you might remember better, Erica. Does the viewer recognize that Argus dies in that moment?
In the film?
Yeah. Was it evident, or did he
That's a
just,
good
or could they have just thought he went to sleep?
that's a good question. I would have to ask somebody that doesn't know the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Because the problem is that when I'm watching the film, I'm very aware I'm so close to the text. So I don't have to do a lot of thinking.
Right.
And so like even so I was invited to the pre-screening and I brought my friend who I used to work at the pub with, who knows nothing about the Odyssey. I was like, you are my plus one, come with me. And then afterwards, the poor guy, I was just like, tell me everything. What did you get from this? What did you get from that? So like I got it, but that's really interesting. Like I wonder if everybody else would have understood that. There are lots of things that I wonder, are you taking that away from this film unless you pay really, really close attention? Because you do need to do that in all of Christopher Nolan's films. Like you really can't fall asleep for any moment, which that's his style. That's great. Like he has a huge fan base for it. But yeah, with the Odyssey, it's an interesting question, certainly.
Yeah. Actually, as you mentioned, I was thinking, I don't know if you've done this, but maybe you should go bring a microphone and interview people coming out of the cinema, even if you don't watch it again, and put that on your channel. If you get people willing to be on camera, because that would
That's a
be
really good
awesome.
one. I could go to
Especially,
like a little local cinema. I love a good local cinema with like one screen,
yeah.
that's like super chill and it's all like the community come to it. That's where I watched it again a few days ago. It was at this like little local one. And
Mm.
actually, to be fair, in that screen, it wasn't like very full. And there was a couple in front of me who were probably like 21 that just made out the whole time. So I was like, all right, you don't really care about this film. But also, could you do it here? Because this is my this is my view of the
Line of
screen.
sight.
And the other one was that there was this old couple who, and they were like very old, like probably in their early 80s. And maybe within like 20 minutes of the film, the guy literally very loudly said, "This is too loud." And then they both got up and they left.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess
And I was like,
I guess people are
interesting.
protecting their hearing if they're older and they can hear that well. I
And
I
so
was
they just left. 20 minutes in, they were like, gone.
I was prepared for it to be too loud. I went to another movie earlier this year, and it was so loud that it bothered me. I've always protected my hearing since my dad had damaged it using power tools. So he's like, always protect your hearing. So my hearing's decent, such that sometimes in the movie theater it can bother me. But this
Mhm.
didn't. Wherever we were, where Jackson and I were watching it in Colorado, I was quite well balanced, fortunately. So. I thought the
Did you see
sound
it
was
in
one of the best
IMAX?
parts. No, I saw it in, I think maybe it was Dolby. I don't remember if it was Dolby surround, whatever.
Mhm.
But there was otherwise a regular theater. Yourself, did you see it in IMAX?
So the pre-screening was at the IMAX cinema
Ooh.
here in central London. So I saw it the first time on IMAX, and then the second time I saw it was on just like regular. I don't know all of like the film talk. Like one of my friends is a big film person. She was like, "You have to see it in 70 millimeters," and I was like, I don't know what that means. I'm just gonna go to the cinema and watch. So I watched it on like a regular cinema screen the second time, and there
Mhm.
is a huge. I have to say there is a huge difference
Really?
between the
Tell
two.
us. What's the
Yeah,
difference?
I found that the colors were so much more muted on a regular screen.
Mm.
Like the first time I watched it, I was actually quite surprised because when you see the trailer, it's all just like drab and neutrals and that kind of a
Mm.
thing. And then in the IMAX, you could really see the reds, you could see the golds, you could see all of that stuff where I was like, oh, okay, like I was wrong. I'm very happy to be wrong. And then I saw it in a regular cinema and I was like, no, it's drab again.
Oh, wow. Well, that would have, for me, changed a lot as far as the aesthetic interpretation. I remember you were mentioning, because I hadn't taken note of the interior of the Palace in Ithaca. You said there's reds and these colors, and I'm thinking like, well, I guess I was too distracted taking notes or something because I didn't notice that. But I guess it was because it was a regular cinema. It wasn't an IMAX.
Yeah, I think
Hmm.
had I just watched it in a regular cinema and not in an IMAX, first of all, I probably wouldn't have said those comments. Like when I left the cinema this time round, I was like, if I were to re-record right now, I would say, gosh, why does he hate color? But when I watched it in IMAX, it was really obvious. But obviously, then there are only 40 IMAX screens, like what, in the world or something like that.
Yeah.
So can you rely on the 40 IMAX screens to show your color, or should you have just gone, like, I guess that's a conversation for like cinematographers and all that kind of stuff. Should you have just gone
Mhm.
really hard for the regular screening? And then that way, when you're in IMAX, it's like kind of overwhelming. Because if most people are going to watch it on a regular screen, what difference does it make if it looks really good in IMAX?
Yeah, I'm probably never going to see it in IMAX myself, as much as I wouldn't mind. But just making the time to do that and finding
Hmm.
the IMAX cinema. So but that's really it. What a good point. That means there's a unique experience that Christopher Nolan was clearly thinking about those 40 or so screens in the world, and that maybe 1 to 2% of the people who ever see it, but that's what is his main audience, and everything else is just residuals for
Hmm.
him. I could that yeah, and nevertheless, it's still a very popular film, and something I think we also can both agree on is both for what we do, especially as YouTubers talking about this. We're just so
Hmm.
happy to be able to share our nerdy, more detailed understanding with people who are now introduced to it. So as much as we complain, as much as like I, complained and I like to complain and about these nerding things, it is better. It is obviously better that there should be such a big Odyssey, Homeric film, even if it's like you said, Christopher Nolan, big letters, and Homer, somewhat smaller.
Absolutely. And this is, my reaction going into it initially. Like when I went in, I wasn't expecting anything, super close to Homer. I was actually really surprised by how much of Homer was in there. Like I really thought this was going to be like another, and apologies to anybody who likes this film, but I thought it was going to be like another Troy, where it's just like not
I found
Homeric
someone else who
poetry.
doesn't like Troy. Yay.
Like when you watch that, you're just kind of like, you just use Troy as a backdrop for your own story, which is fine, but don't call it Troy. Like there's no reason
Yeah.
to do that. So I was expecting that with the Odyssey though. So I was very pleasantly surprised going into it. Like my bar was so low. And also, and again, people have really come for me in my review for saying this, but I also was like, most actors now in Hollywood have Botox. Like, are their faces going to be able to move? Can they do
Right.
any of this stuff? Like,
Yeah.
as much as people want to come for me for that, it is important to immerse you in an ancient film. If we're going to be telling an ancient
Yeah.
story, you can't have somebody that doesn't have their forehead moving. That works in like The Devil Wears Prada because they're all, in the fashion industry. That's fine. Like all of them look beautiful. They all have porcelain skin. I expect that from that film,
Mm.
not from The Odyssey. But again, I didn't see that problem in the film, at least in IMAX. So I was like, phenomenal. This was really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to all those things, I went in with very low expectations
Mm.
of what the film was going to be. And therefore, my reaction to it in my video was very much, okay, I'm going to come and be positive because if people are coming in and they can see these little bits of Homer, it's better to latch onto those and to encourage people and be like, hey, that's just in the book. Like, it won't be that difficult for you to actually make that transition
Mm.
between the cinema and then picking up this book. Because, as you know, the books are on a crazy pedestal. They're like these huge works of Western literature. And so
Yeah.
people, and I get that, I totally get that. Like people are just like, I'm not qualified to read this book. I feel that with Russian literature. I have The Master and Margarita on my bookshelf, and I've had it there for 4 years. Because every time I get close to it, I'm like, I can't read this. And I keep getting told, yes, you can. But it's scary.
Yeah.
It's on a big sort of like literature, shelf. And so I get that with the Odyssey, and my goal was to go in and to try and break that down for people so that they know that they can go to Homer and actually it's not that different from what you know. There are discrepancies, but it's still very actually approachable and easy to read. Obviously not in the ancient Greek, but in
Oh,
translation,
yeah. In
it's
translation, it's so modern.
yeah,
It's so
exactly.
normal the way that people emote and the way they speak as far as how they interact with each other. It has the aspects. I think it makes it such a perfect vehicle to get us into for lack of a better term, the culture, what was felt to be right and wrong. How obviously revenge is seen as well, I would Odysseus certainly believes is that revenge and his killing of all the suitors plus others is right. Um, and whereas that's and so when the way they speak in this normal way, it brings you in, and you can easily access. I think it's very accessible. Depends on the translation. We have modern translations, Emily Wilson and Fagles, for example, and they make it really easy to
Mhm.
follow what's going on. And I'd also recommend more than one translation to everybody out there because they'll have all the same things. There'll be hardly anything that's truly different except that the style of vocabulary and those sorts of things. Or if it's a verse
Absolutely.
translation.
And like maybe like the odd word that they'll be like, oh, I'm choosing to do this version instead of this word or whatever it
Yeah.
happens to be, which I think that there's a lot of discussion between people that don't read the ancient languages who are like, well, that's a mistranslation. And then when we understand the ancient languages, it's like, it's It's not a mistranslation, it's just a choice. Like, and that's fine.
Yeah. In fact, if what since you're a classicist, tell us what polύtροπος means.
Um, so this word is unbelievably difficult to translate is the issue. And to take it out of its ancient context is, again, a very difficult thing to do because there's no direct translation of this word, which is what makes translations really interesting when you read them, because you get to see how somebody is trying to tackle this word that is inherently intranslatable even. So polytropos is a word that you would say is like of many turns. It implies ambiguity to it. So you have to choose a description of this word that is sort of, wishy-washy. You're supposed to understand that the subject of it is inherently ambiguous. So if a man is polytropos, well, then he has to be of many turns or of many ways or any of these sorts of descriptors of it. And that's a really important word to describe Odysseus and to kind of open our tale with, because it is a word that is typically used to describe sea journeys. So it's not a word that we see describing people, which is why it's so inherently difficult to pull it out of its ancient context, because we don't have an English equivalent of describing somebody as, oh, you're, again, wishy-washy or something to that degree, that you would also be able to attach that to a boat, if that makes sense. So, and I'm not a linguist, I can just read these things. So when I listen to linguists who are also then saying like, oh, well, we could use this and we could use this, I'm like, wow, that's incredible, because you're right. Like that description, like of many turns, does somewhat make you think of at least some sort of vehicle, right? You're not thinking of a person. So it's a really interesting word, but it's an inherently very difficult word to pull into a different language.
Oh, well, yeah, I think that's very well said. I think it's all of that. I think it's I mean, when people speak ancient Greek today, like myself and my friends, we use pretty much late classical Attic Koine version, which is it's pretty homogeneous. It's pretty much the same thing with some important but relatively small differences between eras. But Homeric Greek is so different. So all I can do is sort of comment on what does tropos mean when we say it.
Yes.
Well, we'd like say tini tropoi. In what manner? Be like well, it's literally quo modo in Latin. So tini tropoi, but tropoi is also hui tropoi, also in plural used to describe personality of a person. And also, so we have his like a ship voyaging all around the Aegean and the Mediterranean, and also his personality, the way he changes as a person. One of my favorite parts. In fact, I decided to look it up because I was just talking with Farya, other YouTuber, about this, and I did not remember the exact details of Book 8, which is maybe my favorite in a lot of ways because no one ever covers it. There's this great part, so I have it. I have part of it here. So Leodamus, who is the son of Alcinous, this is around Phaeacia. Nausicaa has already found him and saved him, and in Book 7 he gets introduced to the hall. And Book 8 is like, well, let's have some games. Let's relax. Let's show our stranger, who remains unnamed up to this point, which is a lovely suspension of disbelief. Let's allow our stranger to see how we Phaeacians do, how great we are at games and running and sports. And then they're like, hey, Odysseus, you're this obviously impressive fellow. Look how strong you are. I bet you could do really well at all this. And he's like, and actually I have it here. This is the Murray, A.T. Murray translation. Leodamus, why do you mock me with this challenge? Sorrow is in my mind, far more than contests. Seeing that in time past I've suffered much and toiled much, and now I sit in the midst of your assembly, longing for my return home and making my prayer to the king and all the people. So he's like, no, I'm just too sad. I don't want to do that. And then Euryhalos, Eurilla, how do we say that in English? Euryhalos.
Pronunciation is bad for me though.
Yeah, hold on. We got to go through Latin. So Euryalus, Euryalus. Oh boy, that is terrible in English. Euryalus?
So the way that I say it is Euryalus, but
Euryalus, sure.
But again, that's why I'm always very tentative to correct anybody, because I'm like, I am not good at it. Like the languages side of things, I'm like, pronunciation is questionable.
We'll call him broad salt. Broad Sea, Broad Sea. So Broad Sea, Euryharos, he is like, I knew it. You're all just a pirate or whatever. You're not really this noble figure that you've been making yourself out to be. And then he's like, oh, Broad Sea, look at you with your eyes and your teeth and being all like handsome, like, not everybody gets both brawn and beauty, and brawn and brains is what I meant. And so because just basically says you're not very well spoken, and says, okay, I will do it. And then he throws the discus farther than anyone else. And then Athena, in the guise of some other Phaeacian, says, wow, look at that. That was great. You're amazing. There's no doubt that you totally beat everyone here. And then Odysseus is like, yeah, you long young whippersnappers, you young kids, you try to beat that. And he's getting his mojo back. He's recovering from that sort of a PTSD recovery kind of thing.
Mm.
And I've never seen it ever depicted on film, this particular part, but it's one of my favorite little scenes in the original.
Well, you should tell Christopher Nolan since none of the Phaeacians are there at all. I was sad not to see Nausicaa. I didn't expect her to be in it, but I was like, oh, come on.
She's always looked over. I mean, she's not in the 1997 one. The Phaeacians are almost so short in the 1997 one, which I love,
Hmm.
that it's not quite pointless that they're in the 1997 one. So I can respect in that sense that he wanted to merge things together. We see the same thing done in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou,
Yes.
where they merge things all together and it comes off fine. So that's not that problematic, except that how if you wanted to tell this story as it is, it's really important. So it's
Hmm.
that the
Yeah, and I mean, I went in hoping that we would, because I really love Nausicaa's character. Like, again, if we're looking at like just the female characters of the Odyssey, Nausicaa is a really good example of someone who's young, but also very responsible, very respectable. Like, she just does like everything right, but she also doesn't let Odysseus like walk all over her. I really
right.
like her. She very
Yeah.
much, when they get to the gates of the city, she's like, I'm going home. You can come later. And then you've got to talk to my mom. She's going to be sitting behind my dad. She's the one that has the power. And I'm like, yes, give more of this. This is
Yeah.
great. And every single time she's cut. So I always go in with like,
Yeah.
maybe this is the time.
Yeah. One of my bigger complaints too is actually that there are so many interesting and well-spoken and speaking female characters in the Odyssey that are sometimes not even present. Circe is an important role in the film, but is
Mhm.
very short, very little what she has to say. And Calypso also is kind of like a therapist, I guess, in a way, as
Yes.
far as like how little she says and how little opinion she seems to have on anything in the film. Whereas in the original, it's her will and her accepting of what the other gods, the more powerful gods, wish of her. All of that is very interesting, and also Penelope. I wish I had gotten more Penelope, and more of really the whole return, because 13 to 24 is
Hmm.
all Ithaca all the time, and it's always like the last little chapter, including the 1997 one. Everyone focuses on the journey, but like you say, it's nostos.
Yeah.
It's the return, not necessarily the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the film then? What is the thing that you least liked?
So I'm trying to be like, a public person about this rather than just like a classicist about this.
Be
But
classes too.
the
You do both.
ending, the ending bothered me so much when I was in the cinema. Like I actually reacted to it whilst I was sitting there. I was like, they're not just like this isn't how it. Are we doing spoilers for the film?
Yeah, spoiler away.
Okay, just because it's different than the book. But to get to the end and just have them like ride off into the sunset, I was like, is this a joke? This is not like this is not the ending. This is like it was all a dream and like he actually died or something like that. Like change it that way. And then obviously, I have to sit there and be like, well, how does it work in the film? And like, does it work with the story that he created? But I
Mm,
actually strongly dislike the end of the film as a classicist because you had two options. And I think people don't realize that the end of the Odyssey is highly debated, not only in the ancient world, but also much later and throughout history. There is not a clear-cut idea of if the Odyssey ends in book 23 when Penelope and Odysseus reunite, or if it ends in book 24, which is essentially, for people who don't know, what we have at the end is the reunion of Odysseus with his father, because that's like the last little bit. But then also Athena comes down and basically makes it null and void that he murdered all of these nobles, because there was this whole issue with the fact that he killed all these
Yep.
people and there should be a revenge arc, which we've been warned about. And she's like, no, 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 it's fine. So that's the end of book 24. So when we come to retellings, people will choose. They will choose book 23, they'll choose book 24. I don't mind which one they choose. You have two options. And Christopher Nolan was like, actually, what about a third, where Telemachus is king and they ride off into the sunset and they have their little pendant with them that like united them or whatever. I was like, what? That can't be how we're ending this.
Oh, man, it made me really appreciate the end of Inception by comparison. Um, the
Rather have it be ambiguous.
little top spitting. We should have had a little Athena pendant spitting. But the and whatever you that reminds me of is I don't know, I'll mess up the lyrics, but lay down your sleepy head. Night is coming. I forget the lyrics. Da, da, da. It's the end of the Return of the King. It's that
Oh,
when they go up
yes.
to it's Into the West is the name of the song.
Yes.
Into the West, which is actually a
Literally.
very cheesy song. And it's probably the least good of the three, big songs. Because ended the first one, then there was that second one, the end of Two Towers, which is very good, and the third one is like, oh well, I guess it's over now. Uh, but it also bothered me because a happy ending for me is Odysseus and Penelope just ruling, the rest of their days. Of course, Odysseus has to go do that stuff for Poseidon, and that he after that, oh boy, it's all conflated in my memory. But Tiresias tells him that you do all that, and then you will actually die, or you will have permission to die. But I remember something in book 24, like then they ruled the rest of their days more or less happily ever after. Can you remind me? I don't remember any of the
Yeah.
details there.
So, I mean, again, the last chapter is very, and classicists still debate what the hell this final chapter is, because you could, and this is a big thing when we're looking at Homeric poetry. So, because it's survived for so long and we don't have, I don't think people realize we don't have like the original manuscripts from like the 8th century BCE. We're working with copies and copies and copies and copies. And so when we're looking at Homeric poetry, there's something that all classics have to do, which is looking at something and saying, can I remove this from the story and have it not change the story? And if that's the case, was it potentially a later edition? So a really famous one is in the Iliad. We have this night raid, which is my favorite chapter in the whole book. It is so cool. Diomedes and Odysseus, that's why I bring it up. Odysseus, they like go to the Trojan camps and Diomedes really just murders like everybody. It's a very cool scene. And you can remove that, though, completely from the Iliad. No one ever mentions it again. No one talks about it. So there is a theory that that is a later edition. So when it comes to book 24, everything that's kind of said in book 24, you do have to take with, is this Homeric poetry really? Or is this a later edition because somebody didn't like that it was just sort of like tied up with Penelope and Odysseus reuniting in Ithaca? And everything that Tiresias says, even in the underworld scene, is very sort of wishy-washy. That's sort of him. That's him in kind of everything. He's a prophet. And so even when he's like, oh, you've got to take this ore, and then you've got to go to this place, and you've got to plant the ore, and then you have to do, like, there are all of these really weird steps that Odysseus has to do, to the point where, then we go later in, sort of in the ancient Greek world, and then people rewrite that because they're like, that's too weird. We don't like that. So then instead, the story is not, happily ever after. It's, oh, actually, potentially Odysseus has like 4 kids running around,
Right.
and one of them comes
Polygamous.
back and marries, like, it's all of these really bizarre, like the ending of Odysseus' story is not unfortunately clear cut. We have no
Right.
idea what the general consensus was, if there was a general consensus, because these stories are so old and they were told orally. So it's sort of kind of up in the air. The Christopher Nolan ending, this is why I was like, I have to be much more of like a public facing person about this, because the Christopher Nolan ending, I guess you can end it however you want to because of everything that I just said. It was just, for me, I was like, you've got 2 options and you chose neither. And you just invented a new one, but we have so many other wild endings. If your third option was like one of these niche Apollodorus endings, I would have been like, hey, you know what? I didn't like it, but it is from the ancient world.
Yeah. But instead, you know what? And I felt the exact same way, and I've done a bit of reflection, and I think I hate that ending slightly less now because why is Laertes and why did Anticlea, who does not appear in the film, which
Hmm.
upsets me, but because in the 1997 film she's played by the famous Irini Papas, and she's so Greek,
Hmm.
and she's like, I cannot live without my son, and she goes in and just goes into the water, and she dies of grief in the
Hmm.
poem, but she obviously commits suicide, which I think is an interesting way to explain dying of grief. That's what
Hmm.
that means, maybe euphemistically. Anyway, the parents had already retired
Yeah.
when Penelope and Odysseus take the throne. And so I find that so unusual from like the modern idea of royalty, and that if you're
Hmm.
king or queen, it's for life. And then,
Yes.
you live out your years. But it's telling, I think, too, something about ancient society where you have to be physically strong and healthy, and you do have that kind of respect of the people, which, the whole kingdom of Ithaca is basically Ithaca, if it's, assuming it's those islands that are like, there's Cephalonia and I can't remember the names of the others. There's like four of them, and that's
Yeah.
probably the kingdom of Ithaca, I would assume, I think is more or less the interpretation, right? So it's this little place of how many, maybe 1,000 people. So it's not a huge place, and also there are no other, laws. There's not a massive, country of several polities that have a common legal framework or something. It's just like if you're strong enough and tough enough to hang on, you can do that, which tells us a lot about that ancient, I think, Bronze Age, or certainly even the Dark Age, early Iron Age
Hmm.
interpretation of civilization. So thinking about that and the fact that Laertes had retired with Anticlea, why could not Odysseus and Penelope also retire?
That's also a good point. Something I didn't consider. Because also, I mean, when we're looking at the idea of royalty in the Bronze Age of Greece, we don't really know how it worked because of all the things that you have mentioned. Like this is very unique to that period of time where it kind of, and we also don't know how power is really given because when it comes to Mycenae, for instance, in Sparta, the only reason why Agamemnon and Menelaus can have two seats of power there is because Helen is the rightful queen of Sparta.
Oh.
Well, how is she the rightful queen of Sparta? Because Menelaus just marries her and he ends up getting Sparta. And then Clytemnestra goes off and is married to Agamemnon because he is the rightful heir to Mycenae. So we don't understand how that's passed down because traditionally through history, at least we don't see it from later on, that it's passed down to women. That's not something that we see.
Mm.
So the idea that it's written there and there's no explanation. Like I think this is also a key when looking at literature. If this was something that was particularly bizarre, they would have some sort of explanation. It's Homer. Homer explains everything, like to the point where it's like how you even put on armor. Like those things are described. If this was particularly out of the ordinary to the audience of Homer's time, it would be described.
Mm.
So we would get a description of like, well, the reason why Helen could take over instead of one of her brothers, who we do know that her brothers are dead because in the Iliad, she questions why they're not fighting for her. And Homer's like, that's because they're dead. And you're like, oh, okay, so that's fine. Does that mean that one of them was the rightful heir and then it was just given to Helen? Was she always the right? Like, there are all of these questions. I mean, I don't even know if that would work. It's one of those things where we just don't understand it. We just
House
don't
of
know how it
Dragons
works
thing.
at all. So it is, I
Mm.
guess, interesting to
Yeah.
look at that.
Yeah. That's interesting. I did not notice that before, so I'm gonna have to reread that part.
Hmm.
Uh, and speaking of the original poem, what's your favorite part about the original Odyssey poem? It could be a scene, it could be a theme.
Oh, this is so rogue, but it's something that I rediscovered a few years ago. So I had read it, in like very academic settings, like doing the translations and those sorts of things. And you're not really just like, I hadn't read it for enjoyment in so long. And then I did a series on YouTube where for the first time in years, I just got to sit there and read it and then to summarize it. And really peculiarly on Ithaca, when Odysseus returns, we see that there's like some sort of hierarchy among the animal herders on Ithaca. So, like, Eumaeus, who's a swineherd, runs into the goat herder, and they have a full-blown argument where the goat herder is like, yeah, well, you smell. And you're like, well, it's kind of rich coming from the goat herder. Like, And then there's a cow herder at one point, and he kind of gets along with both of them.
Mm.
So I really like that now because I'm like, I
Melanthius,
want to
right?
know more about the herders. Like,
Yeah.
why do they have beef? Why are they competing? Aren't they all giving the same things to the palace? Like, I'm confused as to what's going on.
Why does the cowherder have beef?
Like, see, exactly. We can do a lot of those nice little puns as well. It's just, it's one of those like really small notes when we get back to the Return of Ithaca where we see them like constantly jibing. And also like the goat herder is friends with the suitors, but the swineherd isn't. So like what happened between the goat herder and Odysseus that he would side with the suitors? Like, I
Mm.
just want to know all of this like backstory that's not given to us and is never going to be given to us. But if anybody's watching this and they're like, I want to do fanfic, can you choose that for me? I will read it. I will publicize it. I'll be like,
Mm.
this is what we needed from the Odyssey. That's my favorite part at the moment. It will change in like 5 years.
Oh, that's fantastic. You know, that actually that reminds me as far as fanfic or other interpretations. You may have heard of it, but of me saying like what I think the Odyssey should be on film and the Iliad. I don't really know what you think of this idea. Animated, anime, because you can do all the gore, and you
Mm.
have 24 episodes. It's like a TV show of the Iliad, and then the second season, the 24 of the Odyssey, and a narrator narrating every line in translation. We can dub it into Greek later. And when characters speak, who a character is not the narrator would speak for his or her own self with a different voice actor. But otherwise, we get every line, and we would see
Mm.
visually depicted everything. Am I crazy, or what do you think of that idea?
No, I think that's a really interesting take. I don't know. I'm just thinking like trying to like layer everything. So I like love animation. I'm like a huge fan of like dark animation, like less anime, but like dark animation, those sorts of
Hmm.
things. I don't know how long that would take, is what I'm thinking. Like to do all the animation and then to hire all the actors and then to do all of the like line overlay. It's a really cool concept. I would love to see it done. It would take like 7 years to do. It would take a super long time.
Less time than it took Odysseus to get. He was that long with Calypso, so
That is true. So maybe that could be the marketing.
that's
It
right.
took us 7 years to do
Yeah,
this, but like Odysseus, we have a homecoming.
that would be good.
Yeah, not
That would
not
be good.
bad.
Was there any part about the film that outdid the poem for you?
No, never.
Okay.
That's impossible. I would be really intrigued to hear if somebody thought that. I guess it would be more so the casual reader might think that. So somebody who maybe stumbled into Homer would read it once and then go see the film and be like, oh, actually, the depiction of, I don't know, maybe something like Charybdis. Like a lot of people when they read Homer, because the word whirlpool isn't used in the ancient Greek, so because we don't have that word in the ancient Greek. So it's described as a hole in the water that sucks in water 3 times a day and then spits it out 3 times a day. So
Right.
we know that that's a whirlpool. But like maybe I'm thinking of the casual reader. They're like, why are we going into this many words to describe something and blah blah? And then maybe seeing that scene, they're like, oh, that was way better than
Mm.
what I read potentially. For me, I'm way too close to the text. Like, there's just no way that I would go into that and be like, this was 10 times better than what Homer did. Like, no. Anytime I write a sentence, I'm like, well, it's not even close to what Homer could do, so just throw it in the bin. Like, there's no
Um,
point. There's no point of the sentence existing. But what did you think?
I do not agree with that. As a fan of the Odyssey Effect, I think you have an excellent pen, and everyone will enjoy your writing. I'm sorry, what was your question, Erica?
What did you think, though? Same
Uh,
question back to you.
oh, something. Well, there's some things that were very powerful cinematically, like
Mm,
the Odyssey, like sorry, the Cyclops scene, and also the sirens were just there's you can imagine a lot when the story's told you or when you're reading it, but having that weird sound and actually blocking out our hearing, that's what a great use of cinema
amazing.
to
Amazing. Like,
to
no notes.
yeah, exactly. That was really interesting and unique, and you can't quite get the same thing out of the written word or someone telling you
Hmm.
what's going on in this or that part of it. The other though, the Cyclops scene for me really encapsulates my overall impression of the film, which is on the one side being a cinephile and liking good films, like wow, it was horror, it was deeply scary. I had all that going in my head, like, wow, this is so impressive and terrifying. And the other part of me is like, this is just not the Odyssey because there's no talking with him. And so let me know what you think about my interpretation. So I see uh, the Cyclops. I'm sure other people have had this interpretation, but I've done very much less reading than actual classicists. So the Cyclops is the primitive version of people. He's a primitive
Hmm.
man. He lives in a cave. He's a caveman, but he also has livestock. So it's like this earlier kind of, it's like a cultural memory of earlier
Mm.
kinds of people, which is why Kyklops probably, it could mean the circular eye, which is maybe a retcon linguistically, but it's more like the Klops, the stealer of
Hmm.
Ky, just like in German today, Ky, the Ky, which is cow. So cow stealer, and that being a theme apparently in Indo-European myth and legend. I'm not very familiar with that other than just having read the etymology on Wiktionary. But the that's so interesting that he's this primitive. In fact, he doesn't have two eyes. He only has one. It's like there's something weirdly like an ancestral cultural memory of less civilized people who don't eat bread, the
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And so I found that really interesting. But he speaks, he knows the same language as the as Odysseus and his hetairoi. So they're able to communicate. So he is really just a man. He's a person, and thus it's whenever I read it, I remember hearing this from stuff that it's cannibalism. But isn't he like an alien? Isn't he like a different species? But
Yeah,
he's
I
not
say that
supposed
all the
to.
time as well. Lots of people say cannibal, but I'm like, I mean, he's a monster.
Right.
So
Okay. Sure. So you're in favor of a more of a less human-like interpretation of the
yeah,
Cyclops.
but again, that's up for debate. That's just me and my personal reading of it. Classicists are very passionate about these debates. So
Mm,
that is, I'm just on one side of it where I'm like, I don't know if cannibal's the correct word. And I don't use that word when I talk about that scene
hmm
because of my personal reading of it. But I would say if you're reading a translation that says cannibal and you're more comfortable like speaking in that way and just regurgitating that as opposed to getting into this debate, like go for it. Like there's nothing wrong with that at all.
All right. Well, fair enough. Yeah. And when he is able to use his wits, I wish Odysseus were just smarter in this film. He
Hmm.
doesn't have to make right decisions, and he makes the right amount of wrong decisions, I think, in the film to balance it out as far as the poem goes. But his wit is, and his ability to speak well, persuasively, in all kinds of ways, is just not present. He does
Yeah.
do some lying in Ithaca, which is good. I like that. He's Odysseus the liar, so I was glad to see some of that. But yeah, the fact that we don't get his outsmarting of the Cyclops, and then at the end, the replacement, because my understanding of why he has to declare, "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes of Ithaca. Here's my address," like in the beginning of Iron Man 3, where does my address come after me? And then of course that's what happens. But in part because maybe it's the same kind. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe that when Tony Stark does that in the Iron Man movie, it's actually the same sort of thing. It's this not in this hubris
Mhm.
is the fault, but the virtue, the arete of it is that he has to take credit because if he
Yes.
doesn't, it doesn't last into time.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's but that's culturally weird for us. But I would love a director or filmmaker to present us with that why, make us feel like we can understand why this culture would have someone who feels like he would have to do something that is objectively otherwise stupid.
Hmm. But I think
So
also
yeah.
there's if we're just looking at like the character, there's a lot of pressure on Odysseus to be wily and to be smart. Like that's what he's
Mhm.
known for. That's how the other characters refer to him as. Even in the Iliad, they're just like, oh, well, Odysseus is really great with words, so we'll get him to go do that. So also if we just look like within the internal world of Odysseus as a character and how he's constructed, like, well, he's got a lot of pressure to be really smart. So if people don't know that he has done this smart thing, it doesn't add to his reputation of being incredibly smart. And
Mhm.
obviously, he's telling us, obviously, in the text, he's telling us the story, which is very important. That it's like one of the other men isn't like, oh, he's really smart. Odysseus is telling us the story, which is interesting because then you're like, I would believe that he would do some in real time, obviously. I would believe that he would do something like that. Like he would out himself to the Cyclops that he so cleverly managed to get everybody out of. And then he's like, by the way, let me just ruin it. And it kind of gives his story a bit more credibility. Because why would you tell people I screwed up this badly if you were lying the whole like it just those sorts of things within the internal world of the character kind of contradict itself, which is fun. That's something that you get from the text and you don't really get from the film. We do get the unreliable narrator aspect of it, but I think that a lot of those more complicated themes are kind of glossed over for the sake of cinema.
And that's something else too. I think because all the supernatural stuff that we see in the film could be explained by a drug-induced hallucination. So
Hmm.
as far as I'm concerned, the ultimate conclusion, while Christopher Nolan doesn't force us to that conclusion, I think it's inevitable that nothing supernatural has actually occurred. We have seen his reinterpretation of this stuff as he's been with his calypso therapist. And but how do you feel about the total extraction of the supernatural and the gods, if we or near total from this film and also from Troy? What do you think of that?
So I think when it comes to Homeric poetry in general, if we're looking at the Iliad, obviously the gods add so much to that, but you can actually extract them because they're existing really on a different level of the text. So you have what's going on the battlefield, and then the gods are over here. So we kind of cut to them a lot, and then they'll come down and they'll interfere, but the stories aren't necessarily like relying on one another. Obviously, they're like integral to make the story work of the Iliad because the gods offer a lot of humor, which we need when we're dealing with a war story. But you can extract them. So I didn't mind in Troy, for instance, when the gods weren't there, because I was like, well, that's okay. We've just taken away one thing. I then didn't like the rest of the film, but that's neither here nor there. The Odyssey is much harder to do that with, in my personal opinion, because everything is so reliant. Like you need Athena throughout the text. You really do need that character because she is so important not only to Odysseus' story, but also to Telemachus' story. I didn't mind how Christopher Nolan kind of handled the Athena character, I have to say. I thought that was okay, but to kind of eradicate a lot of then the extra supernatural things, a lot of the story relies on that, is my thing. The magic is so much part of the Odyssey. That's why people start reading the Odyssey as opposed to start with the Iliad, because it is sort of ingrained and there is, magical plants that he can take and there are sorceresses that are doing things and there's all of
They
this
literally
crazy
have
stuff that's
magic
going
wands.
on. Yeah, you just have to buy into it. Once you buy into it after the first, page, it's a really cool ride. So I think it was a choice, certainly. I was okay with Athena, but with the rest of it, that's really what bothered me is the
Yeah.
rest of the film.
Yeah, I think what he did is he took the beats of the Odyssey and a lot of parts of the Odyssey and created a story that is not the Odyssey of Homer hardly
Mhm.
at all. It's thematically and with these elements, but it's still a good story and a good movie, and one that I enjoyed watching. But yeah, but I so missed that. In fact, I my feeling is when I watched Troy, which I always think I remember laughing aloud in the theater. Like I saw the theater back in what 2000,
Yeah.
whenever it was, with a friend of mine, friend of the family who he is super well read, so he knows the Odyssey and the Iliad like the back of his hand. And this is what 26 years ago, whatever it was. And when Hector kills Menelaus.
Oh God, no, don't get me
We're
started.
just like, and I'm telling Crane, this is his name. His name is Crane. Like, Crane, but what? But who is Telemachus gonna go see in the
Yeah.
Odyssey?
Like that was the thing, like Troy just like didn't. So I had done like so much research into Troy because when I first started YouTube, I was like, oh, I'll do like a review of Troy. I'll start there, blah, blah. So this was like years ago. And I started looking really into like all of the interviews that the director had given and the cast had given because I was like, okay, well, maybe they have like really specific choices and they can explain those and blah, blah. And all I kept hearing was everybody saying, we love the Iliad, we love Homer and giving no explanation for why they killed half the characters that we need in literally the next part of the story. And I was like,
Do
I
they
just think that
really
you're
love?
saying that you love the Iliad to sell the film rather than you actually like you
Yeah.
just like the idea of Troy. You were told a version of Troy and you're like, this is what we're going to do. And then we're going to kill all the characters again that we need for the next part of the story in order to make that make sense. Like, doesn't Agamemnon also die in that film?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I was like,
But
well,
Paris and Helen get out through like a tunnel.
oh my God, the tunnel because there's a sword of Troy. I always love the sword of
Oh,
Troy.
I forgot about the Sword of Troy.
I was like, what is this?
Oh, well, watching that, one of the things that really bothered me was the lack of the presence of the gods, especially once I
Mhm.
actually read the whole Iliad. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's quite different. That's a very different story. But of course, there's a lot of things that are in the in Troy and are usually in depictions of an Iliad-like story, like the Trojan Horse. The Iliad is not even the end of the war; it's just
Yeah.
towards the end. Um, if only we had those other epic
Oh,
cycle
this is
work.
something that I always say on my channel because people don't know that there were these, it's like a cycle of 8 epics that we would have had that told the entire story of Troy from start to finish. So we would have gotten everything, and we just have these two that are not even the first or the last books that survive. So
Yeah,
we have all of these other spaces where you can assume that somebody who would have been engaging with the Iliad or engaging with the Odyssey would have known, they would have heard the rest of it or been familiar with all of these stories. And we have to piece it all together based off of what people literally 300 years have told us, like 300 years later, have told us about these stories or their own interpretations of them, which is a lot of what these films will not Troy, ignore Troy, just always ignore Troy when we're talking about this. But other films or other TV shows, they will have to piece together those backstories from 5th century Athens. So they've got to use Euripides, they've got to use Aeschylus, they've got to use all these people that were doing retellings. They're doing we have no idea how much of that was in the Homeric text or the other
and
epics
the
that we had.
Aeschylus changes the assassin of
Yep.
Agamemnon to Clytemnestra from
Hmm.
Aegisthus, which is when I read the Odyssey, there's something like, oh, because I'm much more familiar with the Oresteia. So I was like, oh, that's different, but it also shows the difference of like this is something too I remember speaking with Jackson Crawford about, because there are people out there who want to even worship the Norse gods today, that they actually
Hmm.
want to be Norse god worshiper like pagans, and which is that's fine. But what do we have of that religion? We really only have some clues to it in those in the sagas and so forth. But as Jackson Crawford often mentions on his channel, these were stories and legends, and they were entertainment, which I think you mentioned too in the Odyssey Effect, how this
Hmm.
is entertainment, not a religious text like the Bible. Because the only thing that people might be able to compare something to, as important as the Odyssey and the Iliad are to like the Athenians, like Plato complains that people take it, they use that as their like moral guidance,
Yeah.
and he in the Republic he says we should get rid of outlaw poetry. It's like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, whoa, Plato, I'm sorry, you lost me there. Like, geez. But I love how in this next book of the Republic he's like, but maybe I'm just high or whatever he says. I forget the wording. It's not that, but he's like, oh, maybe I'm just an idiot. I don't know. I forget what he says. It's like, I'm just crazy. Let's have a
Yeah.
lottery where the philosopher kings make allow the warrior class to pick their partners for the procreation of children, but we'll actually pick them, but secretly. Anyway,
Hmm.
whole thing's crazy. Everybody out there should learn Greek literature because it's insane.
But
And
yeah, when it comes to the idea of like religious texts, we don't have that from ancient Greece.
no,
So these are like the Iliad and the Odyssey are the first two texts that we have. So we have to use them as some sort of framework of like, okay, well, what gods are present? Like, for instance, Dionysus isn't present or mentioned at all in the Homeric text. So we have to get this understanding of like, when did these gods show up at what point? Because
I
no
think
one
he's mentioned in
cares.
Linear B, and isn't he?
Who? Dionysus.
Dionysus. I think there's a
Yes. So
figure in
it's
Linear
interesting
B.
in that sense where it's
Yeah.
like was this like a region thing? So do we have a specific regional translation of the Odyssey and of the Iliad? This is a big question. Like again, this is all just theory. Like do we have the Athenian version? And in ancient times if we're back in 5th century and we're like, "Oh, we're reading Homer's," was somebody going to turn around and be like, "Wait, that's the one that you like? Oh, that's so embarrassing. You have to read this one from wherever it happens to be. Oh, the one from Delphi. There's this bard who goes to Delphi and he's really good. You got to listen to him. For all we know, that's what's happening. Because you mentioned Plato. Plato quotes different lines of the Odyssey that we don't have.
Oh,
So
right. Alternate
in the
versions.
Republic,
Yeah.
he talks about the Odyssey and he quotes the Odyssey, and we don't have those lines. Now, that doesn't indicate that there was another necessarily. It doesn't indicate necessarily there was another version of the Odyssey because it could just be a misquote. I do that all the time on my channel where I say things like, well, Achilles said, and then I kind of like, role play what Achilles said. And it's not a direct quote. It's just sort of trying to get the vibe across. Entirely possible. But because Plato doesn't say that, it is a quotation, it could potentially indicate that he has a version that we don't have.
Mm,
So it's all sort
yeah.
of, it's a lot more. or I should say, it's a lot less clear than I think what people assume when we look at history. There are so many question marks around all of this stuff, and you
Yeah.
kind of have to be comfortable sitting there going, I don't really know. I think this is a logical conclusion to come to, but yeah, we could be wrong.
Already in early Hellenistic times, they were debating on what is the authoritative text.
Hmm.
And there's the only one that I can remember is in the proem. There's pasi to all the birds, and then there's daita, that it's like oyo no sita pasi or oyo no sita daita, and that
Hmm.
still exists. It's like we're not really sure which one is more authoritative, and
Yeah.
maybe neither is. They have an equivalent
Yeah.
status.
And to think of like all the different, looking at Homer in the Odyssey, like to think of all the different versions that we could have, like maybe there are different stories, maybe there are different characters. Like if we think about the Underworld episode,
Oh
again, you
yeah,
can't prove any of this. It's just like an interesting thought experiment. But like to think of the Underworld episode, if we did have, regional retellings of the Odyssey in different ways, did they have different souls come forward that would have meant more to them? Or, there are all these things that could have potentially changed. Or in our version, for instance, something I love to tell people is Iphigenia is alive and well in Homer. She is not murdered. She is there. She is literally named in the Iliad in Book 9. You can go and check this. Agamemnon is so desperate to have Achilles come back into war because he realizes we're in trouble because Achilles has told his mom to tell the gods to let all of them die. Questionable decisions from Achilles, but regardless. And so Agamemnon sends an embassy to his camp to go and convince him to come back into battle. And he tells them, here are all the gifts that I'm going to give Achilles if he comes back, if he stops burritoing himself up, and if he accepts my apology, then I'll give him all these gifts. And it's, like the normal things like tripods and all that kind of stuff. But then he offers a woman that Achilles can marry. And one of the women that he lists, he says, you can have my daughter, Iphigenia.
that's
Now, Achilles gets really mad at this. So this is like totally backfires on Agamemnon, where Achilles is like, what makes you think that I can't get a wife of my own? And you're like, well,
yeah.
that wasn't the
You
point.
stole Briseis from me.
Achilles is like, that's so disrespectful. And
Yeah,
you have to be like, to be fair to Agamemnon, he's trying.
yeah.
But regardless, her name is different. So, as you know, we do have a lot of names that are switched over. So even ones that we're really familiar with, like Jocasta, is Epicaste,
Epic.
right?
Essay,
So,
right.
but we know that they're the same characters, and that's the same with Iphigenia. She has a different name, but it clearly is Iphigenia when
Yeah.
he's talking about her. So, yeah, it's all of these differences potentially that come up, and that, again, later on in 5th century Athens, you will then read Euripides when he talks about Iphigenia at Aulis, and it's horrific, a horrific play, but it is a different version where she is sacrificed and she is killed. So what? Yeah, I always like to think like, well, what was the most popular version to everybody? Like, what were they liking in
Mm,
the 8th century BCE when all these stories were coming together? Yeah, it's
yeah.
again, it's a bit of a silly thought experiment because we can't do anything with it. But hey,
Yeah, yeah. So what was there? So the motivation that because we know in the Odyssey, as is told to Telemachus, that Aegisthus, on
mhm.
behalf of Clytemnestra, kills Agamemnon, and then Orestes kills them, and so forth. So the motivation is simply that perhaps she had a lover in Aegisthus, not as revenge
Yeah, we have
for
no
the.
idea. This is
Yeah,
the thing. Like, if we
I just.
had the books prior, if we
Mm,
had the poems prior, we would know why Clytemnestra is so mad. And I'm
yeah,
always like, why does she hate Agamemnon? Like, what happened? There's
yeah.
some juicy gossip there. Clearly, like, you don't spend 10 years planning this man's murder. You don't shack up with his cousin, like, unless something really big has happened. Now, obviously,
Oh, wow.
potentially there could have been the murder of somebody else in the family or whatever it is, but something has happened. And it's now just been explained by the 5th century BCE, where everybody's saying, oh, Iphigenia was sacrificed, which is totally fine. That's again, a very, well, when you read it, I want to be careful with this. Again, within the context of the story, guys, it makes sense.
Mm,
Within the mythological context, if somebody has murdered your child, you're going to be that angry. But yeah, we have no idea why
yeah.
in Homer she's that angry.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really good point. And you hearing your video and made me, and hearing you mention it now really connects that for me, that it's so easy to put in, which I think Christopher Nolan did well, putting in the
Hmm.
Oresteia into visually. And I when she, spoilers, kills Agamemnon, when we see that, I thought that was extremely well done.
Mm.
And even though her presence is pretty brief, very big impact, and the in taking away Iphigenia, all of that was dramatic and
Well, they make
yeah,
Iphigenia
sharp.
so much younger in the film
Yeah, that was
for
odd, but
yeah, well, I think it was just for maximum impact
yeah,
because in the 5th century, whenever we're looking at any sort of depiction of Iphigenia, she has to be of marriageable age. So she's at least gonna be like 14 or something, you know?
yeah,
So she is still young, but she has to be of marriageable age because they then tell us that she was then told that she was going to marry Achilles. Achilles has no idea about this, and then that's how she ends up getting lured down to Aulis to then be killed. But
yeah.
yeah, it's big question mark about those things. And Christopher Nolan
Mm.
making it younger, I think, was just potentially
Visual
taking out
language.
because that is quite a problematic storyline, obviously, to a modern
Yeah,
audience. Like you can't
yeah,
just be like, oh, we're gonna marry off this 14-year-old and then kill her. Like
right.
that's a big jump. I will be happy to hold my hands and say you probably shouldn't have included that.
Mm.
But then to do someone so much younger is
Yeah,
also you're just trying to get the same shock factor in there, but
yeah.
just differently.
I assume that's what it was. It makes it easy to tell, okay, a
Hmm.
younger person, obviously his daughter. I guess that's the idea. Okay, so say you are actually the producer now, and you are the boss of Nolan, and you say, hey, yeah, I know this is coming out in July, and maybe it's, I don't know, January. We got to do reshoots. What would you change? What would you make him change?
Oh, one of two things. It depends how much freedom they give me with this. Okay, in this hypothetical. If they're like, you can totally add in a scene because something isn't working, or if they're like, you just have to kind of reshoot one of the scenes because it's not working. So in the first instance, if they're like, add something, like the story just doesn't make sense, add something, it would be Penelope's test of
Yes, the
Odysseus when
bed.
he
Where
comes
is the
home.
bed?
Yeah, it's just so iconic. Like everyone's expecting it.
I wanted the
Everyone
clever
wants it.
Penelope. I wanted
And
her
she's so
cleverness and her,
smart.
and she's so smart. And I would have liked more Penelope in general, more of her cleverness, more of her, because I thought the because already in book one, she's going from being a a because Telemachus is in her mind still a boy, and Telemachus is also acting kind of still like a boy. But
Mhm.
Athena already in book one is helping him like, okay, you gotta step up and take a part in your responsibility, and his. He does it artlessly when he speaks back at his mother for complaining about the song that the bard is singing that reminds her of Odysseus and makes her even sadder. But my interpretation is in that moment, she feels this a little bit of relief that, I'm going to have my nearly adult son to help me with this, and I can kind of relax and we'll be able to work together. What I saw more in the film was there was never much evolution in that relationship. They just have a manufactured conflict, I think, which I didn't like as much.
Hmm.
That goes
I
on
agree
too
with
long.
that. I would agree with that, like film wise, that there was so much tension. And I get probably what he's trying to do is show like how Ithaca is like crumbling without its king. Like even the
Yeah.
family can't get along, because even like the interior of the palace is like it's looking kind of drab in the sense of like there are corners of the paintings and stuff that are all coming off. And then when they go outside, I didn't like the outside of Ithaca because the outside is just like ruins, and I really hate I really hate seeing that when we have these like beautiful descriptions in the text of like how grand these places are and the columns and blah blah blah, and then it's just like rock sort of that's weather beaten
Yeah.
or whatever it is. And so I think that's probably what he was trying to do, but I agree. I'm like, why? I felt like that was something that we're adding in there as opposed to showing, I don't know, you could have shown it more elegantly, is
Yeah.
what I will say. I'm not a filmmaker. I have no idea if you could really do that. When I've done my review, I've actually had a lot of people who are more into film come into the comments and be like, I love this idea, wouldn't work practically speaking. So if there's somebody else who's watching this that's like, Erica, you're totally offbeat, do let me know. But I think that we could have done it a little bit more elegantly to show that there is still tension in Ithaca without it being Penelope is almost talking down to her son, and her son is like, yeah, Telemachus is a brat. He is in the Odyssey, but he's a brat for a good reason, and he's just kind of bratty
Mm.
in the film, if that makes sense.
Why did you like the Telemachus character so much, Tom Holland's portrayal?
So I thought that he handled the brattiness really well.
Mm.
This is the thing. I think it's really easy to make him unlikable, and I actually have a real soft spot for Telemachus as a character. Excuse me. I think that he is a character that people gloss over because he is quite bratty, but he is so lost in the text. Like he is expected to step into the role of potentially king or at least running the household. And he has had no model of how to do that. He does not know how to be a man, let alone a king. He doesn't know how to order people around and how to be respected. And a lot of what we see in the text is him really trying to do that. And then there is for him, when Odysseus comes back, there is this sort of like, oh my God, thank God. Like somebody can show me what to do. And I think a lot of people, not just men, I think a lot of people can relate to that, where it's like, how are you supposed to step into a role that you haven't been shown or you haven't had a good example of that? And I think we see a lot of that on social media now. So I do love Telemachus, but he is a brat because he doesn't know how to balance these things. You know, Odysseus is a good king, and we do hear that he's a good king, but Telemachus doesn't know what that means. So it comes across as him, you know, yelling at his mum, being like, just go up to your rooms and cry up there. And it's like, well, let's not do that. She is the queen, and she listens to him because of the power play that's going on in the room with all the men in the room. She doesn't really have a choice but to listen to him. But I think Tom Holland did that really well. And I think it's because, so Tom Holland and I are the same age. And to me, he played that. Like it almost, I know that he says he played it like a 16-year-old, but because he doesn't look 16, I thought it worked really well, actually. I thought it looked like somebody who was too old to be struggling, if that makes sense.
That's very persuasive. I like that.
But you know what? Everybody says that he's like the worst actor in it. Like they're like, you're crazy. I can't believe that. But maybe it's because I have soft spot for Telemachus.
His soft New York accent, that he does so well. Like I don't like even like Robert Pattinson, who does really well. Also as a Batman, I think the best Batman. Don't
really?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love that movie. I think that movie is extremely well done.
I haven't seen it.
I really like it. But I grew up with the animated series and you know the other movies that came out. But there's something about it which has very similitude of the Batman. Anyway, that aside, I thought his accent was almost cheesy in a way, Robert Pattinson in the film, but it went with his sort of smarmy characters. Well, wait a minute, hold on, was he Antinous or Eurymachus? Because he acted like Eurymachus.
I think a lot of the suitors were just kind of named and then their characters were just kind of squished together.
Yeah.
I think there were just so many of them. And I also think that if you only have like 3 hours to do a film, you either have to pick like one and do the one really, really well, or you've just kind of got to squish them all in together and be like, just be horrible. Like just do that, which I have no problem with that being the approach either. Because I think to somebody who doesn't know the Odyssey to come into it and to have like multiple different suitors that are all, because we do have a couple of suitors that are like the main guys that speak quite a lot. You know, they have really big characters. That I get could be potentially quite confusing. So to squish them all into it, I was like, that's fine. When I'm going to pick fights, it's not going to be there.
Yeah. That's fair. And you really like the Hades scene, right?
Love it. Oh, I love it. But I'm like a vibe girly. So if the vibes are vibing, I'm like, I'm here. That's great. And I don't want to be tugged out of something. So I love fantasy, but anytime there's like an inconsistency in like a fantasy world, I get tugged out, which means that I don't actually like a lot of fantasy. I really enjoy fantasy, but if it's not consistent, I'm like, no. And the underworld scene was just completely, like, it was just perfect. Like the vibes of it, the way the souls came through, also the way that they summoned the souls is pretty much hoovered up and sucked out of Homer and then just spat back out, which I was like, even though these are the wrong souls that are coming forward, 10 out of 10 for how you got them there. And I thought the way they were dressed, I loved it. I thought it was amazing. What did you think?
Well, I really disliked the Agamemnon armor, but what it does visually is it makes it super obvious, I think to a fault, but makes it very easy for the audience to figure out that's Agamemnon. So when he appears all shadowed, like that's when I actually liked and appreciated the armor much more, was that in the underworld or when he sees and we speak. We never see his face either. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So now I'm, of course, had just that the past few days listened to all of it, so I'm not seeing the characters I expect to see. And Sinon or Sinon is there, however we should pronounce his name. And I was like, but these are Tiresias's lines. Why is it? But Tiresias is there too. And why is this happening? I thought of something though that I haven't heard anyone say. Tiresias is famous for changing genders, and I think that's clever casting. I think that might have been a deliberate nod on Christopher Nolan's part.
That's interesting. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
I would be impressed if that turns out to be the case.
I mean, if it's an accident, I think it
They should
works as
just
a
play it
reference
like
to
it wasn't.
Tiresias. Yeah, but I mean, it's meta because it's breaking the fourth wall, I suppose, because
Mhm.
we know about the actual actors. But otherwise, I think that that made it make more sense to me why that there was something else there, another nod to Tiresias
Hmm.
in it. But so let's step back from the Odyssey for a moment. Why'd you get into classics?
Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
Well, we want people to read your book, and it's right, and you, although you tell right away at the beginning of your book,
Yeah,
one of the reasons why, yeah, you
this
can
is
go as
why I'm
much or as
asking.
little detail as you want. Depends if we want to, compel people to find out all the details, but you as much as you like, Erica.
So, classics has always actually been present in my life. So, since I was very young, my dad is like a massive reader. And so he had read like everything in translation. So, it had always kind of been there. And then I was lucky enough to be exposed to it in school. Not everybody is, obviously. And so at like 11, I had to take Latin and so on and so forth. And it led me to reading the Odyssey when I was 16. So basically, the full story is in the introduction of my book. And the reason why I do this is because as classicists, it's really important for us to always know when we go into a text what time period it's written, who's writing it, for what audience, all of those things. And so it was kind of my way of like training my reader to also be able to look at ancient texts in the same way. So I explain my story, which is I was in a psychiatric hospital and I was bored out of my mind. For context, for everybody who's listening, I was there when I was 16. And so you don't have the choices that you have, at least from what I've heard, when you're like over 18. They're like, you can go to therapy or you can go to yoga. That like doesn't exist when you're under 18. So it was like you have to do everything in the schedule or else they're going to like write it in your file and then they discuss it in a meeting and blah blah. So one of the things is education. And when you're 16 and your school has been told you're in a psychiatric hospital, they don't want to send you any work. So I had these like days of just, okay, I didn't write this part in the book, but I would just play Scrabble with the nurses because I had nothing else to do. And they would thrash me. They did not go like lightly on me at all. They were just like, oh, look at that. We won again. And I was like, come on. Like, this is, it's actually really funny to look back on. But it was just one of those things where I was so bored and I could not play another game of Scrabble or do another puzzle. And so I was begging my mum, like, you have to tell them that I'm bored. You have to go in there and tell them. And so finally she did. It was like maybe 3 weeks or so. And I was alone on the ward. I was the only under 18 person in this psychiatric hospital. And she came back with the Odyssey. And she just said, your classics teacher gave me the Odyssey. You can read it if you want to. There's no pressure. If you get stuck, you can email her. And so I was like, well, okay. And I wouldn't have picked it up myself. Like, even though classics was always a part of my life, I wasn't like an academic kid. I was a sporty kid. So even though I liked classics, I never really saw it as like a really cool thing. It was just something that I kind of liked that was on the side because I liked to read. And then I read the Odyssey and I was like, whoa, like I get this. This is so different. It was so fun. It completely took me out of where I was. You know, like my window could only open like this much for 3 months. I didn't leave the hospital for a month and a half, and my window opened this much. And it's so funny actually, where my room was, it opened up to the courtyard, but because I was under 18, I wasn't allowed to go into the courtyard. But the smokers would go down there every night and they would bring like speakers. And so I would stick my phone out and I would Shazam all of their songs. And they started to get to know me. So they'd be like, Shazam is back. But suddenly that wasn't my reality. Suddenly I was like on the boat with Odysseus. I was interacting with people. I was trying to figure out like, would I do Scylla? Would I do Charybdis? Like, what would I do? And it was the first experience I'd ever had where I was like thrown into the world. You know, all of a sudden I understood why people loved these books and they loved these stories. And it was because I got that time with the Odyssey. And it was really after that that just kind of everything clicked into place because I had had this really, really unique experience with the text. You know, so many people encounter it in classrooms or because someone is like, you have to read this piece of literature. And I got it and it was like, you read it or you don't. And because of the craziness that was happening around me, I was so zoned in and I was alone. And so I had nothing else to do that then afterwards it was just sort of natural that classics would just keep coming up and I would keep telling people and be like, no, you have to do this thing and you have to read this and I'll help you. And so that's kind of how we've ended up here.
Ah, it's amazing and incredible. And I read that in the Odyssey Effect. I thought, wow, how much you must have been able to relate to Odysseus when he was not free, and how
Hmm.
you must also have seen a light at the end of the tunnel. If Odysseus can get out of this,
Well, there
and
was
your own
also the element
nostos occurred
of
as well as a result,
there's
right?
also the element, I think, where like I didn't know how long I was going to be in for as well.
Mm.
So I don't know if other patients have this or if they just decided with me because I was unwell that they were like, we're just not going to tell her because it'll freak her out. So I was in there for 3 months, but when I went in, I was kind of under the impression that I could go home at any point. So for like the first week, I was like, I think I brought like one t-shirt in my backpack when they were like, you're going to be admitted. And I was like, cool, they're going to realize it was a big mistake. And this was actually in the original, the first manuscript. I wrote this whole scene in, and my editor was like, you've got to take this out. Because it was too funny for what I was writing about. And she was like, it's just not
Mm.
going to work. But yeah, I brought a t-shirt and I remember a nurse coming in and the nurse looked at my bag and just went, is that all you brought? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, okay, you're going to have to call your mum and she's going to have to come and bring you more clothes.
Mm.
And I had no idea how long I was going to be in there. And so there was that element of like reading the Odyssey as well that like, he's been on this journey for so long and he's just trying to get home. Like that's it. And when I was in there, the only goal I had in mind, which sounds really bad, but is very real. You're not thinking I want to get better. You're thinking I want to go home. Like whatever I have to do to get home, I'm happy to do it. So I was like the perfect patient in there because I was like, I just got to go home. I need them to think this has been a mistake, that I can go home and it'll be completely fine. And, I'm gonna eat all my meals and I'm gonna be great. And obviously it doesn't work that way because they have more information than you do. They also have medical records, which like didn't help anything. But there was that element of the Odyssey that I felt very deeply connected to, of like, okay, well, he's lying, but like, is it bad that he's lying? Like, does that make him a bad person? Because I lied a lot. Like I was just willing to say anything that would get me home. So again, it's a very unique experience. It's a very unique connection that I had to the text, which is why I wanted to include it in the start of the book. Because
Mm.
since I have that, I'm never going to look at a retelling the way that anybody else will. And that's fine. I had to learn over the years how to separate those two things and how to actually, integrate into society in a more normal way.
Yeah. Wow. And I read that at the beginning, I was like, wow, this clearly means something to her when I was reading that it can't mean to everybody else. He is the everyman, the every person, and almost everybody on earth can probably find something that they can relate to in his story. But that in particular, what that does, I think this shows your instincts as a writer are really strong, because for me it said like, okay, wow, I'm gonna buy in to, of course I was already a fan of the channel, but I'm gonna really buy into this reading experience because there's an authority of personally earned experience of why this is such a powerful story. And why did you want to write the Odyssey Effect?
So actually, the Odyssey Effect was given to me by the publishers.
Hmm.
So I'm so privileged and so blessed that actually I got offered a number of books prior to the Odyssey Effect. And I said no to all of them because I was like, this is just not for me. Like it was all. So the way that publishing works, in case people don't know it, is that the vast majority of books are people who have come up with their ideas and they pitch to the publishers, or, they pitch to agents and they get their books in bookshops and it's like their baby. And then there's a small portion of books where a publisher will look at their library and say, oh, we could really have a book about X, Y, or Z. And obviously, with the upcoming film, a lot of publishers looked at their nice catalog and they were like, we don't have a book that does X, Y, or Z that links to this big cultural moment that's going to happen. And one of the books that came my way was The Odyssey Effect. It wasn't called The Odyssey Effect then. It was actually called The Odyssey of the Odyssey, which I'm thrilled we didn't keep that name because that would have been a hard sell. But it ended up, I love the title. It's so cute. It's so like succinct. As soon as they pitched it to me, I was like, yes, that's great. Fabulous. Love that change. But yeah, so that's how it came to me, that they had a really clear idea of what they wanted. They knew it was going to be illustrated. They knew like lots of little things that I had to include that I didn't know about. For instance, like I speak about this Arthur episode that is a retelling of the Odyssey, which I mean, I grew up kind of watching Arthur. My dad's Canadian, So I had a lot of those influences, but I didn't know that episode existed. And it was like a non-negotiable that Arthur was going in there because they were like, we are primarily a US audience, or we have primarily a US audience, and so therefore they're going to know this cartoon. A lot of them probably watched this. That part of the book, I included SpongeBob, which they didn't. I said we have to include SpongeBob. If we're talking about Arthur, we have to include SpongeBob. And I also had to include The Simpsons. And so there was like a lot of like negotiation, but they had a very clear idea of what it was going to be. And even the voice of the book, they wanted me to write how I speak, which I really struggled with.
Really?
Because of like, I think, you know, when we're at university, especially here in the UK, like we're taught, one, no one cares about your opinion, is what we're taught at school. You do not write, I think. They don't care. You have to write, it could be argued or whatever. And then also, we're taught a lot of times to make sure that everything sounds simple, but very academic. So we're not supposed to use like big words. We're supposed to use the most succinct words that kind of portray what we're trying to do. But if you do it that way, it indicates that you're more authoritative. At least when I was at school, that was what they taught us. Because it was like, if you can explain this simply, but also make it sound smart without the vocabulary, people are they're gonna trust you more. So that's how I went into writing this book. And I gave them like, I think it was like 5,000 words or something, because they asked just to kind of see how my style would work and what they were thinking. And they were like, yeah, you're gonna have to rewrite all of this. Like we need that YouTube voice. We need you to be funnier. We need you to do whatever it happened to be. Like throw this in, throw that in, throw these comments in. And it took me like weeks to actually be able to write like that. But I'm really proud of it. I'm like, okay, I think it works. And when I was reading the audiobook, I was like, okay, this is exactly how I would say it. So happy with that.
That's interesting. I would have never guessed you had struggled with that because I read it before I listened to it, and it was your voice. It was just the same YouTuber voice that you know, we know, and then hearing the audiobook is like, yeah, I mean that couldn't be more natural, it seems. So you had to struggle to do that. Well, you succeeded.
Yeah, it was just
Yeah.
one of those things like I didn't even anticipate that would be such a hurdle to get over. So when they kind of sent back those notes and they were like, "Oh no, we want you to write as you speak on YouTube," because they had found my Odyssey series, which is why they came to me. And like the first video call I got on with them, they were like quoting my Odyssey videos back to me, and they were like, "This is the exact thing that we need for this book, and this is why we want you to write it, and why it couldn't be anyone else's." I always say the book should have gone to someone else because it took me months to debate whether I wanted to write it. And I was like, I don't know. They should have gone to somebody else. And instead, I signed this contract at the end of May and they were like, great, hand it in the 1st of September. So I was like, okay. And I had to figure out the voice. I had to figure out how to do everything. I had to write 40,000 words in like 3 months.
They did not make a mistake, in my opinion. And I really think it's the way that people should, if they're just not familiar with the Odyssey, or if they've only seen maybe 1 or 2 depictions out there, or if you've already read it. This gives so much insight into the history, into the interpretive history.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, it's really fantastic. And in fact, with the end of it, I wrote down the quote. See if I can read my own handwriting. Talking about the individualized ways of interpretation. The next time you get into a conversation about someone's response to the Odyssey, ask what it was about that particular take on the story that made someone react that way. Use our collective love of the story to bring us together, and our personal relationship with the words on the page to help us understand one another. That's fantastic. It's important for me to remember because I'm so fond of nitpicking.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So, Erica, thank you so much for being with us here today. Maybe we can do this again. Maybe I'm looking forward to it coming out on streaming and making more detailed commentaries. Maybe there'll be some other insights that each of us might have in that respect. But keep
Absolutely. The more we watch it, the
yeah.
more we're going to be like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah, for all of our sakes, please continue making your amazing videos and writing as well.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure's been mine.